What's going on, everybody? Welcome to our first ever episode of the Dad Hab Live. I'm excited. I am Joe Messeri. I will be your host. I am the founder of the Dad Habit, and I am really excited about the show that we've got for you today. Actually, we're taking a page from the NFL's playbooks. This is our first day. It's like opening weekend, Monday Night Football. We've got a double feature for you, two great guests that'll be coming at you. But before we get to that, I want to introduce the team working behind the scenes here. We've got Tyler right now, who is on the board that is producing. Hello, Tyler. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Joe?
Doing fantastic. Very excited that we are up and running. And then Rachel working quietly in the background. She is not on a microphone today, but she will be helping moderate all of the social media as we go through this. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Dad Hab Live and why we wanted to bring this to you. There are a lot of things at the Dad Habit that we have been doing that have really helped a lot of the fathers that we work with. And our goal is to really just help dads be better men and better fathers for their family. And we do that by looking at small habit changes that can add up over time and have really big results. So we read books. We obviously implement things. We have our meetings. And the important part of what we're doing is the fact that we want to bring these conversations to more people. And so we're going to be live here on Facebook and YouTube, wherever you're tuning in. Thank you for doing that. We will also post these as a podcast after we're all said and done. But the beauty about being live on Facebook or YouTube is the fact that we can interact with people out there. So if you've got a comment, please leave it. Or a question, we will bring it to our guests. Or if you have a question for me, please feel free to reach out each time. We always appreciate those likes, those hearts, the care emoji especially. That one makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. Hey, and if you've got a really good point that you're making right now or something like that, Tyler's going to hit it with one of the really hot sound effects we got there. So you'll hear one of these from time to time. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's the drum hit. See, this is perfect. This is why we work at the Kinks. And then, of course, with the dad jokes, we'll get a couple of. And then when you've got a hot take, of course, we're going to hit it with the fire. Hit it with the fire, the air horn. Come on. Pause for dramatic effect. Oh, there we go. Pew, pew, pew. Oh, boy. I'm glad we're getting a minute here to work out the kinks. But anyway, the whole idea is that we're going to stack these small habit changes that are going to make you a better man and a better father for your families. And the thing is, the role of dads right now is really changing. It has changed over the last few years. And we are finding the need for that community. I mean, so many times you hear about moms who have their mom groups, and it's like dads are left kind of on an island. They go to work, they come home, and they've got their family. But there's not a support system that's necessarily built in for a lot of guys. And if there is, we don't even take advantage of it a lot of times because the men are taught that they have to be strong and they have to not deal with emotions, and they kind of put everything, down inside, and all that bubbles up. It's like a trash can. You can only push it down so long. My wife and I have proven that before the bag bursts and somebody's got to take it out. Oh, I hear a guest, a little twinkle in my ear. I think that means our first guest has arrived, and I'm really excited about this. James Robilotta. He is an author. He is a public speaker. He is a former stand-up comedian, and he joins us today from, I believe you're in Minnesota, but I can't keep track of you because you're jet-setting. James, can you hear me? And thanks for taking some time.
Heck yeah, I can hear you.
We are jumping right in, so I am so happy. You are the first guest on our Dad Habit podcast. I was telling the people out there listening that this is something that we are going to be bringing to people for helping to, I guess, bring a lot of the message and hear from the speakers that we learn from, whether it's books, whether it's musicians, whether it's just thought leaders and CEOs. And so I am really excited that you were taking some time out here to be with us for the first episode. Really appreciate it.
Honored to be the one handling the first one. Let's go. The leadoff hitter, baby. Let's slap a single and keep it moving.
All right. Hey, that's it. Set the table. I like that. Don't set it too high. James, man, this month, I should say, in our Dad Hab book club, we're reading your book, Leading Imperfectly, The Value of Being Authentic for Leaders, Professionals, and Human Beings. And I got to say, first of all, for the purposes of this, I'm going to call you Robo because that's how I know you. And that is how I was introduced to you. So for people out there, James and Robo are the same person unless he's got an alter ego that I'm unaware of. So I got to say, man, your book is fantastic. It reads just like you speak, and that is a huge compliment because you are one of the most fun people that I have ever been around in my life. You are one of the most authentic and genuine people that I have been around in my life. And so I want to start with that. How were you able to get that authenticity, one, into a book, because I feel like that is an extremely difficult thing to do, and then just to lead it that way? To lead your life that way, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I was always this way. I guess I kind of always was a little bit out there. You know, I'm a triple Cancer when it comes to when it comes to my astrology sign, so I'm a wee bit sensitive. But honestly, it just feels right? Like it is easier. It's harder. It's hard work to be fake, and to be someone that you're not. And so I think that's a piece of it. And then as far as the book, like I wanted the book to feel like a conversation. I felt like I wanted to feel like we were hanging out at a diner and talking. And so that's really kind of the goal and why I told the stories the way I did. And also, vulnerability begets vulnerability. Authenticity begets authenticity. And so when you give people the space to be real, and you model the way, they often show up, right? When we're real around somebody else, it's kind of like the mental equivalent of lowering your shoulders. You help other individuals lower their shoulders when you are more authentic around them. And so I don't know. That's what I'm out here trying to do, man, and lead with a couple of jokes too, because jokes love to break down some walls.
Absolutely. You make us laugh, and that is part of the reason that I think anybody can relate, is because you help bring down those walls, and then we are open to the ideas that you're sharing. Look, I think that we're talking to dads here, right? And you are a new father yourself, and I think that's so important. And when you talk about being yourself, whether it's in a work environment, a home environment, whether with our spouses, significant others, whatever it might be, I feel like there is this role in our heads that so many guys feel like when they go into the office, they need to act a certain way. When they are in front of their families, they feel in their heads that they need to act a certain way. And that may not be their genuine self. So what do you tell people who maybe struggle with that, with identifying how they can be themselves, even though that might not be what they expect society expects from them?
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, at the end of the day, I live my life based on what I want to be said in my eulogy. Right. And so the way that, and so that means I'm trying to write a story that I'm proud of, and also trying to write a story that is incredible, that is fun, that I want other people to tell. And so I'm not trying to write anybody else's story. I'm just out here trying to write mine. And so when we think about the expectations that society places on us, particularly as men, as dads, you know, there's a lot of ways where we can start shoulding on ourselves, where it's like, well, I should do this and I should do that. Look at that dad doing this, so I should. And look at them, should over here, and should. And we just get in our own way. And so at what point do we start writing our own story and not the story that other people think we're supposed to write? That's way easier said than done.
Right. Okay.
Especially.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say, and just because, I mean, insecurity is real, right? Like, and especially, I mean, I'm a new dad, and I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I mean, I have some ideas, but like there are instincts. Turns out we as humans have like figured it out, and shout out to genetics. But still, the thing is that there's still a lot of stuff where I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling right now. And I know another dad who had a baby a couple of weeks after me, and we look at our kids completely differently. I don't think either one of us right or wrong, but it's still like, oh, am I a bad dad because I don't think this or I'm not doing that? And I don't think so.
Well, I know that you look at your child as a new friend because I heard on your Diner Talks with James podcast there that you needed to have another human being to connect to. And since that was too difficult during the pandemic, you and your wife decided to just create a human being that you could both hang out with. So I think that's a great way to go about fatherhood, obviously. But you know, I want to go.
Making friends as an adult is weird. So just have kids.
Man. It's definitely hard.
It's hard.
Especially for men. And I think that's one of the things that I touched on before you came on here is the fact that when women have children, there are all these mom groups out there for them, right? They meet at PTA meetings. And I think that that's changing because dads for decades now have been changing the role that they take in their children's lives. More often, women are the breadwinners, or at least equal partners when it comes to the financial responsibility for the families. So how do you see that playing out in terms of you specifically and what you want for your experience in terms of building that new community, because it is a new community, and how is that received from some of the other dads that you've been interacting with?
Yeah. It's interesting. I've had some conversation with some stay-at-home dads, and they talk about like when they go to the park, how they're like left out of the party, right? Like the moms are kind of like looking at them weird. And it's fascinating the way that those roles are not just put on by other men, but sometimes our gender roles are also put on by women. And of course, non-binary folks. And so it's interesting to think about that. I just moved to Minnesota 2 years ago. And so we lived here for about 7 months, 6 months before the pandemic hit. And like we said, making friends as an adult is hard. And so there's part of me that's really excited for Rome, who's our son, and for Rome to start making friends. Because I'm like, as soon as my son starts making friends, I'm swooping in on these dads, right? Like I'm coming for you. What do you need? I got a smoker in the back. I'm a beast making wings, and so like let's talk about it, right? I got incentives, and so, but it's complicated moving to a new community. And now being in a role that you are not the most confident at. Right. And so how do you put yourself out there? And especially like you mentioned, where do we as men have the courage to ask for help? Where do we as men have the courage to reach out and be like, I'm kind of stuck. I'm kind of in my head about this. And I have a good group of friends from home that I can do that with.
Right.
But it's a whole nother thing to like walk up to some random person, try to get to know them, maybe hang out with them once or twice, and then be like, I'm going through some stuff. Right. But at some point, you've got to trust.
Yeah.
And someone's got to make the first move.
So I think that comes from the authenticity, right? Which is you being authentic. You can go out there and put yourself out that way. I don't think everybody has that comfortability level that you do. But I want to ask, is it the same thing to be authentic and being comfortable in your own skin, or is that a false equivalency there?
No, I think I would put those two in the hanging out in the same boat.
Okay. So, cause I think that I think sometimes admitting you're uncomfortable, right, is being authentic. And I was wrestling with this as I read your book. And the next step that I go from there, then, if they are the same thing, if you acknowledge your insecurities, are you obligated to make an attempt at changing them? Even if you might not be successful, but are you obligated to try and make a change in those?
No one's obligating you. You're not obligated to do anything. You just sit on a couch and eat some Cheetos, bro. Like you can do whatever you want. Like, you're not obligated to do crap. But I think, I think as I'm someone who believes that if you have knowledge and you're not doing something with it, then you're wasting people's time. Okay. And so for me, like if I have knowledge about myself, that there are things that I need work on, I think it's also, I owe it to myself, but I also owe it to my partner to at least communicate some of those things. And sometimes just the dialogue helps. And are we obligated to completely work on it? I guess that really depends on the impact that it's having on your life, right? Like if you're like, my big toe is weird, right? Like, are you obligated to get plastic surgery or start doing toe flexes? No. Right. But if you're out here and you're like, I don't think I'm enough. I think I'm a failure. I think, or whatever, those kinds of things, like that stuff is going to impact your family life. It's going to impact the way you show up at work. And those things you are obligated to work on, in my opinion.
I like the way that you phrase that, though, that if you have knowledge and you're not sharing it or acting on it, then you're wasting someone's time. And I think that if you're talking about that of yourself, if you have the knowledge that something is bothering you to a level where it is either debilitating or damaging in other ways, then you're wasting your own time if you're not dealing with it, because you're dealing with the stress and anxiety and worry that comes along with having those hanging over your head.
Yes. The day I stop learning is the day I die, as far as I'm concerned.
I love that.
I'm out here for some growth.
one of our hashtags that we use is lifelong learners over at the Dad Habit. So I'm all about that. I want you to share a story, and you're going to have to go read the book, everybody there. But you were grew up in academia, I'll say, in your professional life. And there was a story from your book that you shared about I think it was a residence director and a meeting with a student, and how the student kind of challenged her. Can you share that story and the lesson that it taught you, especially on being striving for perfection? Because I think that is one of the things that a lot of dads feel the pressure of is striving for that perfection.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So there was this student. I worked in residence hall. I worked in residence life for a while at universities. So supervised teams of RAs. And one year there was this one student who just kept doing dumb things around the halls. He would be
so many of us did.
So many of us did, but he would like rip down RA's bulletin boards. He would like draw phallic things on the walls, but they weren't pretty. So it was like, at least make it cute, bro. Right? Like he would be ripping down people's whiteboards and things like that. And so just did a bunch of stuff, messed with fire extinguishers, but we could never catch him in the act. And so all we could do was slap him on the wrist because it was all hearsay. And so one day he did something bigger and he stole a bunch of books from the bookstore and got caught. Clearly an issue. And so my supervisor had caught wind of this gentleman. And so when I set up a judicial hearing for him, she said, I want to sit in on the hearing. Sounds good. Here we go. 3 of us come in, we sit down. The first question we ask the man is, so why'd you do it? A natural first question, right? Like maybe there's something going on with some finances or something going on with his home or whatnot. He couldn't afford books, needed to steal them. Let's get the whole story flushed out. He looks us back dead in the eyes and he's like, you've never done anything wrong. I said, first off, bro, you're never going to be a lawyer, right? Like you're never going to be able to like go, Your Honor, like you've never done anything wrong. Okay, I rest my case. Not going to happen. But my supervisor decided to one up him, and she looks him back dead in the eyes, and she's like, actually, I haven't. And y'all, I wanted my job. So I looked him back dead in the eyes, and I said, it's true. She's an angel. And I can see her halo, right? Like, and so, but he obviously knew that she was lying. So he calls her out. He's like, okay, lady, sure. So you've never done 38 and a 35. You never sent a text while driving. You never jaywalked. You never rattled off a whole bunch of things that people do on a regular basis. I did all of those today. And so right, all those things, rattled off a whole bunch of lists and a whole bunch of stuff. And she looks him back into the eyes like, no, I've never done any of those things. And I'm sitting right next to her. And in my head, I'm like, who the hell is this? Right? In the back of my head, I'm like, who are you trying to be right now?
Right.
And the student could also tell that she was lying because I watched him shut off. And the reason why he shut off is because as human beings, we can't learn things from people who are perfect. We can only learn things from people who are imperfect. Yep. And in that moment, she tried to feign perfection in order to teach a lesson. But when we try to teach each other through perfection, it doesn't lead to learning. It doesn't lead to growth. It only leads to shame. And shame's not an effective teaching tool. You know this, Joe. I'm sure you're like me. Did your parents ever tell you when you were younger, you know what? I'm not mad at you. Right. I'm just disappointed.
Yep. I think about it all the time.
It didn't make you change. It just made you feel worse about yourself. Yeah. Shame's not an effective teaching tool. So why do we try to teach each other through our perfection when we should be teaching each other through our slips, through our struggles, through our stories? Right. Those are the things that make us more relatable. And those moments of authenticity are beautiful.
And so I read your book and I read that and it was in the back of my mind somewhere. And a week or two later, I'm getting the kids ready to go out the door. My wife is, obviously doing the same. We're trying to get ready for work and everything's stressful. The dog needs to be walked. Who spilled this? A typical morning in a parent's household, I feel like. And I lost it, right? I lost it. And I yelled at my wife in a way that I shouldn't have. And I looked at my children, I looked at myself, and I just knew that it wasn't how I should have reacted. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but I took that moment and I apologized to my wife in front of my children so that they could see that too. And I explained it to my older son, like that Dada was wrong, and tried to make it to something that he can relate to, because it wasn't about anything that she was doing in the moment. It was about me and where I was at and whether it was just the stress that was and how it was affecting me. But I feel like that had been one of the best teaching moments in there. And then another story that like just came to mind and seemed to resonate there was when like I acted in the right way was when I was coming home. We had a cup of coffee, and every parent out there knows what that caffeine is in the morning for you. We had made it all the way from, 3rd Avenue, which is like 10 blocks from our house. He's got his scooter. We're going there. I get to the door of my house, help him lift the scooter in the door, hand him the cup of coffee, and he drops it. And I can't tell you, having got that coffee home, how disappointed I was. And he looked at me, and he the first thing he said was, "Dad, are you mad?" And I said, "Look, bud, I'm not mad." I said, "We just got to go clean it up. It happens." And I laughed, and we laughed. And I said, "We can't leave it there because other people and blah, blah, blah." But God, it made me laugh. And it's funny because the laughter, I think, gave me the energy that coffee usually provides. It's amazing how our body produces chemicals and things like that. But I had the
Monsters
patience in
Inc.
that
taught me
moment.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Monsters Inc. taught me about the power of laughter.
It's so funny, man. I had the patience in that moment, but we don't always. And one of the things that you touch on in the book too, that I thought was really interesting, and it's from your life as an RA as well, is you wanted to be something for everyone in there, and you talked about how difficult that got for you. One of the things I didn't see in the book that I'm curious about is how did you change that? How did you break out of that cycle and find something that worked for you that was sustainable and still fulfilling?
Yeah, I mean, I think my Achilles heel in life is that I need people to like me. And that's not something that everybody has, but it's something that I certainly have. And it impacts the way that I show up. It impacts my need for validation. I think we as men have a deep desire, whether we choose to admit it or not, for validation. And when we don't get that validation, then we're going to figure out another way. And it makes us be defensive, makes us cut people off, makes us speak louder, makes us cut people down, right? Some of those kinds of things when we're not feeling validated in our manlyhood, in our life, in our intelligence, and our whatever.
Right.
And so, I mean, I still struggle with letting other people determine my value. And it's something that I'm still a work in progress on. I was talking to my counselor about it the other day, and I'm a huge proponent for counseling. And so I think when it comes to this question, I'm still a work in progress. But what I would say is that I'm learning to trust myself more and trust, like, James, no, you can make this decision. You don't need the approval of somebody else. You don't need to run it up the flagpole anywhere else. Like, you can just be like, no. This is what I want for my life, or this is what I want in this moment. And so I'm going to stand up for myself. Even if it's like, do you want this food or this food? I want this food. Instead of like, I wonder which food she wants.
Right. Whatever
which
you
one
want.
would make her the happiest. And I'll choose, right? Like every once in a while, like you got to make a decision for yourself. And you do that in a way that's also recognizing that Tina, my wife, also wants me to be happy. Right. And so me constantly focusing on her happiness is not allowing what she wants to happen, which is for me to be happy. Because happy wife, happy life is a bullshit phrase. Right. It just is. It's a cute little cliche that we as men like to throw around, and it's an excuse for us to not stand up for ourselves and be lazy in relationships.
Yeah.
And so
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that goes back to what we were talking about with the work environment, right? And push and just putting out whatever mask is there. Happy wife, happy life only works if we are pushing down the garbage and the trash that exists without taking out our own emotional bullshit and what we're dealing with. So 100%. I agree with you there wholeheartedly. And it's not authentic, right? It's not authentic when you're swallowing everything.
Yes. No, it's not. And sometimes, like, I mean, I've been divorced before, right? And one of the things that I went through in my divorce that I learned is that I did, as I was talking about before, I kind of followed all these shoulds. It's like, all right, well, they got a job here, so I should move, and they want to buy a house instead of renting for right away. So they want to buy a house, so we should, and they want a second dog, and so we should, and now they want to have this, so we should. And I was like, at no point did I stand up for myself, or even, it wasn't even a matter that I didn't stand up for myself. It was also that I didn't know myself, right? It wasn't that moment where it's like, James, what do you want right now? So that you can stand up for yourself if you need to, or if this is going to make you happy, then that's beautiful, right? But like some of those moments, like you said, are just complacency, and they're excuses for men to be lazy.
So I want to ask you then, what has worked for you in terms of refilling that tank? Because we hear the expressions like, you got to put on your mask first when you're on an airplane, or you can't pour from an empty cup. So what are the things that you do that have helped re-energize you?
I think first off is, and this is going to be interesting, but first off is trusting my partner when she says she wants me to be happy,
Mm,
right? Like truly like believing that. And that's a big thing. And then I think other things that I've done for myself is carving out time to do things that make me happy. Right? There's this principle called the third place principle, and if and it's a third place principle where they have we have work and we have home, but if that's all we have, we're kind of this unstable thing. So we need a third place. And so that's a thing, that's a hobby, that's something that brings you joy and something like that. So it's like, okay, let me not disregard my third place. For me, when I was back in New York, was improv comedy. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go do an improv show, and those kinds of things. And so like learning that those things that fill my bucket are really important for how I then show up for my family.
oh, yeah,
And so I think some of
absolutely.
those things, like, and right now I'm a professional speaker that normally outside of COVID times travels around the country and talks to rooms where people breathe on each other. And so as we get back into that, which we're going to start doing more in-person gigs, what that looks like is like, well, I'm not just going to become a stay-at-home dad, or I'm not just only going to do virtual things because I have a son. No, I'm packing them up, putting them on the plane, and we're going to go do things because I
Right.
got dreams also. And I think it's a really valuable thing to also teach your children that you can be a great parent and follow your dreams at the same time.
I think that's super important because so many times it's an either or. And it has to be sometimes, right? You do need separation in some cases, but when you look for the instances where that Venn diagram can overlap, whether it's, I was able to take my son into my office just so he could get a taste of that world and know where dad's going every day when he goes to work. Or if those times where, yeah, you're hurrying up and getting dressed every morning to get out the door, but when you have the time to slow down, to do that and let them struggle with those things. There are a lot of moments where it has to be either or, but it's not always. And if you find those times and opportunities to get both in, I think it can be so rewarding at so many times there. And I think, one of the things that we talk about is just scheduling the time and being protective of it, because we look at money and we don't look at money as the be all end all, right? And material things. Health and time are the two biggest, what's the word I'm looking for here? Commodities.
Indicators?
They're the two biggest commodities that we have, right? You can always go get more money. You can't get more time. Your health is something that if you don't pay attention to it, when it's done, like it stops you in your tracks and you can't do anything else anyway. So I look at those things and think that they are so important. And if you schedule that time of saying, okay, you're going to go do your speaking, and then Rome gets to know that, but being all in that moment when you are with Rome or when you are with Tina, like that is what it's all about, rather than just always being distracted by all three. So I think you've done a fantastic job of doing that, because I love watching you. You got to follow this guy on Instagram. Rome's already doing some rapping videos, which I absolutely love there and appreciated. So I want to go one final note here, and I think this is how we're going to end the show, is what's one little habit, it can be anything, that you think is really important that you have in your life that works for you? And it can be anything from, getting that water in the morning to journaling before bed, whatever it is. What's the habit for you that you think is most important to your overall well-being and the success of your family?
Yeah. I think I'm going to go bigger than just those things, if that's okay. But I think it's going to counseling twice a month. And that's been really helpful for me to have somebody else to talk to in a world that tells me that as a man, I should just be holding things right here in a lump, right? We as men are taught to be internal processors. We don't present problems, we present solutions. We don't present processes, we present products. And that's hurting us. We're not talking enough. And so having a counselor has been really super helpful for me, and I cannot suggest it enough. We as men are fascinating because we crave belonging, yet we run from love. And so where are those moments where you let somebody else in? right? And we want other people to care about us, but then we don't use those individuals when they do care about us, or when they are ready to care about us.
I got to pause because that was so good. We as men, we crave belonging, but we run from love.
Yes.
Oh man, that is fire right there. That is fire. And I think we can, this talking, that's what this is about, right? That's what this conversation, this podcast, live stream, whatever you want to call it, that's what the Dad Habit was about. And I love that you were out there preaching it. James, we have to, unfortunately, we'll have you back on because we need to do this again and do this talking.
Amen.
Unfortunately, we have to run here. But before we do, I want everyone to know where they can reach you. So obviously, the one thing I didn't mention was Diner Talks with James. This man is single-handedly keeping diners afloat, and I think he needs to start recording these podcasts in diners when that's doable again, because he's having all those late-night conversations that you have with your good friends, talking about good food and important things that happen at 2 a.m. But what else do you want people to know? Where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm James T. Robo, R-O-B-O, James T. Robo all over the internet, jamestrobo.com, James T. Robo on Instagram, or feel free to connect with me anywhere, LinkedIn, those kind of places. It'd be special to connect with you all. And yeah, Diner Talks with James is available wherever you listen to podcasts. It'd be really dope if you checked it out, man. Can't thank you enough. This is such an incredible project that you're on, man, and I'm honored to be a part of it.
Oh, man, and I am honored that you were our first guest. Thank you for taking the time. There are not enough diners and way too many conversations, so definitely check him out. It's a fun time. It's like you're in the booth with him, so you slide right in. And definitely don't forget to check out his book, Leading Imperfectly. James, Robo, have a great one. Take care of Rome and say hi to the family for me. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, my guy. Congrats.
Thank you now. And everybody else, stay tuned. We're going to take a short break here. And I said we're doing this like Monday Night Football. We've got a double header going as they do in the first week of the season. Miles Bonny will be our guest coming up next. We're going to take a short break and be right back with that. Thanks for listening.